Okay, let's dive right into this. Welcome to today's Explainer. We're going on an immersive spatial tour of what has to be one of the most fascinating and kinda eerie spots in India, Bhangarh Fort. Picture this, you're out in the lush, green Aravalli hills of Rajasthan, just about 50 kilometers from the Sariska Sanctuary, and you stumble upon this incredible juxtaposition. On one hand, you've got this absolutely stunning 17th century architecture, specifically these gorgeous Nagara-style temples and royal havelis. And on the other, well, you have some of the darkest, most chilling legends you'll ever hear.
So, here's our map for today's tour. First, we'll head beyond the majestic gates. Then, we'll check out those 17th century Nagara temples. After that, we're exploring the ruins of Grand Havelis. And finally, we're getting into the curses of Bhangarh.
All right, part 1, Beyond the Majestic Gates, a 17th century marvel.
To really wrap your head around the sheer scale of this place, you've got to picture these serene mountains sitting right next to a massive, sprawling stone fortress. It was built back in the 17th century by Raja Madho Singh. He was actually the younger brother of the famous Mughal general, Man Singh of Amber. But here's the thing, this wasn't just some remote military outpost. It was a bustling, thriving metropolis designed to project absolute power. The number you really need to keep in mind here is 9,000. Yep, 9,000. That's how many houses were packed into these walls right up until 1720. So we're not just looking at a deserted, lonely castle. We are literally walking through the ruins of a heavily populated, prosperous city.
Now, to keep a city like that safe, the whole township of Bhangarh was wrapped in 3 successive layers of heavy fortifications. If you wanted to get in, you had to pass through one of 5 massive entry points. We're talking the Lahori Gate, the Ajmeri Gate, the Pulbari Gate, the Delhi Gate, and the Main Gate. As we conceptually walk through these gates today, we're actually retracing the exact steps of thousands of 17th century merchants, royals, and everyday people who once called this heavily guarded fortress home.
Moving on to part 2, 17th century Nagaria temples, exquisite carvings in stone.
So right as you pass through that main entrance, it's wild. The harshness of all that military architecture just kind of melts away. Suddenly you're standing in front of this incredibly serene collection of Hindu temples. And they all share this very specific, very beautiful architectural DNA known as the Nagara style. This style really hit its peak in the 17th century, and you can see why. It is visually stunning. It's totally characterized by these towering beehive-shaped spires, which are called shikaras, and these beautifully, intricately carved mandapas, or pillared halls. The stonework and the layouts you're seeing, they are absolute masterclasses in 17th century craftsmanship and devotion. Now, what's really interesting here is the sheer concentration of these temples right at the entrance. You've got the Gopinath, Someshwar, Keshav Rai, Mangala Devi, and Ganesh temples all clustered together. Having this whole catalog of shrines right there tells us so much about how deeply spiritual daily life in this fort actually was. The literal second you crossed into the city limits, you were just enveloped by this grand, inescapable display of faith. And to get a real feel for the attention to detail, let's look at the Gopinath Temple. It's actually built on top of a 14-foot raised plinth. Just imagine that for a second. Walking up to a massive temple that's elevated 14 feet off the ground, it literally forces you to look up in total awe. And the stones on that massive base? They are covered in these exquisite, meticulous carvings of deities and intricate floral motifs. It's honestly a miracle they've miraculously survived centuries of abandonment and decay. Okay, part 3. Ruins of Grand Havelis, the social fabric of a lost kingdom. So moving away from the divine, we step into the residential zones. Just past the old, deserted marketplaces, you start seeing the remnants of these Grand Havelis. These were basically sprawling royal mansions, famous for their ornate stone balconies and huge open courtyards. And you can actually see the social hierarchy of the town physically mapped out right in the ruins. Take Purohitchiki Haveli, for example. This was the grand residence of the head priest. But check out its location. It's situated smack in the middle of the temple complex itself. That really highlights just how tightly integrated the religious leadership was with the daily operations and the power structures of the fort. But hey, it wasn't all solemn prayer and the strict administration going on here. Right among the grand ruins is the Nartakyan Ki Haveli, which translates to the House of the Dancing Girls. This is such a striking contrast to those quiet temples we just talked about. It's this vivid, lingering reminder that this place was culturally vibrant. You can almost imagine the music, the arts, and the lively entertainment that used to echo through those courtyards back in Bhangarh's heyday, right before everything collapsed.
Then, right at the extreme end of the fort limits, you've got the royal palace itself. Back in the day, this was a towering, magnificent 7-story structure that looked out over the entire city. But today, only 4 stories are left standing. The top 3 floors have literally just crumbled away into history. That physical decay you see is a pretty stark mirror for the sudden, devastating fall of the kingdom itself.
Which brings us to part 4, the curses of Bhangarh, shadows over the splendor. Let's get into the dark stuff.
So here's the million-dollar question. How exactly did a heavily fortified city filled with 9,000 houses, those stunning Nagara temples, and massive havelis turn into a complete ghost town? Today, Bhangarh is widely known as the most haunted place in all of India, and if you ask the locals, they'll point to 2 wildly popular legends to explain the fort's ultimate doom. One is about a meditating sadhu named Baba Balao Nath, and the other is a really chilling story involving a wizard, dark magic, and a royal princess.
Let's break down that first legend. Way before the fort was even built, a sadhu named Baba Balao Nath used this exact area as his meditation spot. He actually gave King Madho Singh permission to build the fort, but he had one absolute non-negotiable condition. No building could ever be taller than his house. He warned them, if the shadow on any structure falls upon my house, it will result in the annihilation of the fort town. Pretty intense warning, right? Well, tragically, Madho Singh's grandson, Ajab Singh, totally ignored it. He raised the height of the fort, the shadow fell on the sadhu's home, and just like that, the town's fate was sealed.
But the second legend? It's even more dramatic. This one revolves around the incredibly beautiful Princess Ratnavati. Apparently, a wizard who was deep into black magic fell madly in love with her. One day, while the princess was in the market shopping for etar, which is a type of scent, the wizard secretly swapped it out for a love potion. But the princess was sharp. She figured out the trickery and threw the cursed potion straight onto a massive boulder nearby. Well, the magic took hold, and it caused that boulder to roll directly toward the wizard, crushing him to death. But right before he died, he cursed the entire city, swearing that it would be destroyed and no one would ever be able to live there again.
And this is where history and myth kind of violently crash into each other. According to legend, the wizard's dying curse came true almost immediately, in a very real, very brutal way. The kingdom was sacked by invading Mughal forces, and it was total devastation. Everyone in the fort, including the beautiful Princess Ratnavati, was killed. The whole town was just left completely deserted, a ruined shell of what it used to be. It's almost as if the terrible curses laid upon the town were actually validated.
And you know what? That eerie reputation hasn't faded one bit. It persists so heavily today that there's an actual official restriction in place. The Archaeological Survey of India has a strict rule that dictates the Bhangarh Fort remains out of bound for visitors before sunrise and after sunset. So sure, the ruins might look serene and architecturally brilliant while the sun is up, but the second darkness falls, the fort belongs entirely to its legends.
Which really leaves us with this final thought to chew on. When you walk through those massive gates, past the sublime 14-foot plinths and those soaring shikaras of the Nagara temples, and then wander through the crumbling courtyards of the royal havelis, what is it that's really echoing through those stones? Are you just feeling the heavy weight of a tragic, violent history? Or is it something a little darker, the lingering curses of the past? It's definitely a fascinating question to ponder as we wrap up this explainer on the incredible ruins of Bhangarh Fort. Thanks so much for joining me on this tour.